I recently went for an epic road trip, driving all the way from Spain in southern Europe, 2,500 kilometers up north to Norway, to a glacier called Folgefonna. For this road trip, my camera bag was jam-packed with different kinds of lenses, but I ended up using only one lens on the whole trip. And I didn't even plan on buying this lens. It was included when I bought the camera. So let's talk a little bit about the Panasonic Lumix G 12 to 60mm. This Panasonic Lumix G 12 to 60mm is exceptionally light, but even though it is a light lens and weighs next to nothing, it is still very sturdy. It's got a metal mount and it is weather sealed, so it is like dust and splash proof, which is super cool. But it doesn't feel like a cheap lens like some of the other cheap lenses out there that is basically like a toy. So it was the first time that I took my Panasonic Gh6 camera for a trip, and I was used to traveling with my older Canon 1DX Mark II. I mean, you can just see that this is a beast of a camera. It's got a very small lens on it now, that kind of helps, but it's heavy as bleep. I did not plan to use this lens too much on the trip, but I found out that the range is kind of perfect when you're traveling, because at 12mm it is a perfect angle to do some vlogging, and since the range goes from 12 to 60mm, it's also fantastic for landscape photography. And speaking of the size again, the lens and the camera, it doesn't stick out that much. I mean, it does get a little bit longer at 60mm, but still compare that to a full frame lens. Not a fair comparison, but that's what I used to travel with, and this is what I travel with now. And as it is this small, you can also get some cheaper ND filters for it. Because a filter for a bigger lens would be, let's say that it's around £100 or $100, while on the smaller Lumix G 12 to 60mm, it might be half price because the filter is smaller. One tip here, if you already have some bigger ND filters from other lenses, use step-up rings. That's what I've been doing the whole trip, and it just works a charm. You don't need to have a matte box. I have made a video about the step-up rings. Check that video up here if that interests you. So as mentioned, great for vlogging, great for landscape, but also the minimum focus distance is so small. It's almost like a macro lens. And when you are this close, you get a pretty cool depth of field, you know, like the blurry background. So this is not a fast lens, but at f3.5, that close, it looks pretty good. And of course, if you put it all the way out to 60mm, of course the background is going to be blurry, not as blurry as, for example, the lens that I'm filming with right now, which is the 25mm f1.7. That's a much faster lens and the background gets blurrier, but for being a cheapish kit lens, I was pretty happy to see the results. Quick shout out to Artlist for sponsoring this video and making that road trip possible. I've got a drone with me, but I haven't tried it. Well, I did try it back home and it didn't work properly. I don't know if we're going to do it up here. It could be disastrous if it flies away, but if not, I'll just find the stock footage from Artlist Max. So, good to have that as a backup. And, of course, if I needed some extra wind... This is big. Or some moody music. So this is the tiny response. I knew that I could find that on Artlist, and that is something that is quite relaxing, knowing that you have a service like Artlist, because you do not only pay for their services, you're paying for their solution. Let's continue with the lens. The autofocus, Gh6, you know, it's been famous for having horrible autofocus, but matching it with the 12 to 60mm, I did not have any real issues with it, so I forgot to say that for the last couple of videos here on YouTube on my channel, I have only used this 12 to 60mm because I found the angle to be pretty cool for YouTube videos, and the autofocus has not been an issue. There's no pulsating lights in the background, so lens great for YouTube videos as well. It communicates great with my Gh6, and I've also heard that it communicates great with the Gh5 and Gh5S when it comes to stabilizing video. So walking with this lens and one of those cameras will give you a pretty stable shot. The picture quality is sharp-ish. I have of course seen sharper lenses out there, but for the price, again, it is sharper than some other cheaper lenses that I have reviewed on this channel, and I never felt that I have to change it to a more expensive lens, because the sharpness and the colors, very natural colors, I mean, that's only some of the reasons that I did not use any other lenses, because I could see I can do anything with this little kit lens. Oh, and if you shoot videos, it has also relatively little focus breathing. So when you change the focus from closer to further away, the edges don't breathe a lot. I mean, they don't move in and out too much. So that's a very positive thing if you are a video shooter. Now, the lens is not perfect, of course not. It's not very good for nighttime photography or video shooting. I mean, it opens up only to f3.5, and having that on a micro four thirds sensor camera is not ideal, to put it like that. If you need to shoot more in nighttime, you can use, for example, the one that I'm using now, the 25mm f1.7, which is twice as fast, more than twice as fast than this one. Of course, the range, you are then limited to only having a 25mm, but this one not very good for nighttime photography and videography. If you have some lights, if you're in a studio, you know, you can do it. Speaking of studio, I would not recommend having this one as a professional lens, maybe some local jobs and stuff like that. And when you are used to using lenses that has a fixed aperture, going to one that has a variable aperture is kind of a nightmare, because once you start zooming in, depending a bit on your camera settings, the image will go darker and it just looks a little bit unprofessional maybe. But again, I would not buy it because of that, because you are very aware that when you buy this, that it's not a fixed aperture. I mean, to sum it up, I drove back and forth in total 5,500 kilometers. It did not leave my camera body. So I think that says something about this lens.
It's me.